In Canada's early days, voting was considered a privilege. Only women who owned property could vote, which many didn't have enough money to own. Men believed that women were weak mentally and physically, and if women didn't own property, that they shouldn't have the right to vote. Only 96 years ago, women were allowed to vote. It was during the First World War in 1914, some women were allowed to vote. Women who served in the war were taking over for men in factories and in offices. They were also holding families together, while the men were off at sea. While the war was still happening, it was very hard for the government to ignore the women who fought the government for the right to vote, especially the women in suffrage groups. The groups have existed since the 1870s. During the war, it was hard to ignore these groups. The women got the right to vote in a federal election in 3 stages. The Militaries Act of 1917 allowed nurses and women in the armed services to vote. The Watertime Election Act extended the vote to the women who had husbands, sons, or fathers serving overseas. And all the women over 21 years of age were allowed to vote as of January 1st, 1919 in a federal election. The reason the women got the vote was because Sir Robert Lord Gordon finally realized that the women were just as mentally and physically as good as men. He lifted the rule that women couldn't vote in 1919 and put the Charter of Rights and Freedoms to that women could always vote in the election that happened throughout the life of women. This is a violation of the democratic rights and the equality rights Pierre Trudeau put in the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms in 1982, which is in decision that women should always have the right and freedoms